Louisville, Kentucky, 1962. The air was thick with cigarette smoke and the scent of cheap whiskey. Cassius Clay, still 1 year away from becoming Muhammad Ali, sat in the back corner of the Blue Diamond, a seedy strip club on the outskirts of town. At 20 years old, he was already making waves in the boxing world after winning gold at the Rome Olympics. But tonight, he wasn't there to celebrate. He was hiding from the spotlight, wrestling with doubts that threatened to derail his promising career. The Blue Diamond wasn't the kind of place you'd expect to find a rising boxing star, especially one as vocal about moral living as Clay. But his trainer, Angelo Dundee, had just told him his footwork wasn't good enough to beat the heavyweight champions. "You're fast, kid, but you're predictable. Those big boys will time you, and when they do, it's lights out." These words had been echoing in his mind for days, keeping him awake at night. 3 days earlier, Clay had nearly lost a fight to a journeyman boxer named Willie Bezmanoff. The newspapers called it unconvincing, and the whispers began that maybe the Olympic hero wasn't cut out for professional success. Clay knew he needed something different, something revolutionary, but traditional boxing wisdom wasn't giving him answers. The spotlight on the small stage dimmed, and a new dancer emerged. She moved differently from the others, fluid, rhythmic, almost hypnotic. Her name, according to the announcer, was Velvet. But what caught Clay's attention wasn't her body. It was her feet. The way she circled the stage, constantly shifting. Weight, never predictable, never in one place long enough to be pinned down. There was a science to her movement, a mathematics that seemed familiar yet entirely foreign to his boxing-trained eye. For 45 minutes, Clay forgot about his troubles and studied her movement. When her set ended, he made a decision that would change the course of boxing history. He needed to talk to her. Waiting by the back exit, Clay rehearsed what he would say. When Velvet finally emerged, wrapped in a worn trench coat with her stage makeup still on, he stepped forward. "Excuse me, miss. I need to talk to you about your dancing." She looked at him warily, reaching into her purse for something. Likely a pepper spray or a small knife. In her line of work, strange men waiting in alleys rarely wanted just conversation. "I'm a boxer," Clay said quickly, raising his hands to show he meant no harm. "My name is Cassius Clay, and I think you just showed me how to become world champion." Velvet, whose real name was Eleanor Washington, studied him for a long moment. At 32, she'd spent 13 years dancing in clubs across the country. She'd heard every line imaginable, but this was certainly a new one. "Boxer, huh?" she finally said, her voice deeper than he expected, with a slight rasp that hinted at too many cigarettes. "Yeah, I know who you are. That Olympic boy. What's a clean, living Muslim boy like you doing in a place like this?" If she expected embarrassment, she didn't get it. Instead, Clay's eyes lit up with the intensity that would later become his trademark. "I'm here because I'm missing something, and I think you just showed me what it is. The way you move. It's not like regular dancing. It's like you're fighting gravity itself." Eleanor let out a short laugh. "Fighting gravity? That's one way to put it. Another way is paying the rent." "I'll pay you," Clay said without hesitation. "Not for that, but to teach me how you move like that. Please, I have a fight coming up that could change everything." She should have walked away, should have dismissed him as another crazy fan with a strange fetish. But something in his eyes, the sincerity, the hunger for knowledge, made her pause. $500, she said, naming an outrageous sum. "And for 1962, 300, Clay countered, "and I'll throw in tickets to my next fight." Eleanor smiled, revealing a small gap between her front teeth that somehow made her even more striking. "You got yourself a deal, Mr. Olympic." "Hold, but we start tomorrow morning, 6 a.m., and if you're late even by 1 minute, the deal's off." "I'll be there at 5:45, Clay promised. his face breaking into the wide, charismatic grin that would one day charm the world. What neither of them knew in that moment was that they had just sealed a pact that would revolutionize boxing forever and forge a friendship that would remain one of the most closely guarded secrets in sports history. If this story has made you feel something already, no matter how small, don't leave without giving back. Comment and tell me where you're watching this video from, and subscribe to the channel. The next morning, in an abandoned warehouse in West Louisville, Cassius Clay arrived at 5:30. The space was empty except for some old crates and a portable record player Eleanor had brought. She was already there, dressed not in revealing clothes, but in a simple sweatsuit, her hair pulled back, face clean of makeup. She looked different, stronger, more athletic than her stage persona had suggested. "First things first," she said, without preamble. "What you saw last night wasn't just dancing. Before I was Velvet, I studied ballet for 15 years. After that, I trained in capoeira with a Brazilian master who came through town with a traveling show. What you saw was a mix of everything I've learned, adapted to different circumstances." Clay's eyes widened. What? Capoeira. It's a fighting style disguised as a dance, created by slaves in Brazil. They weren't allowed to train in combat, so they made it look like dancing. Sound familiar to your situation? It did. As a black athlete in America, Clay was constantly navigating a system that wanted his talent but not his voice, his entertainment value but not his dignity. "I'm going to teach you how to move in ways your opponents can't predict or prepare for," Eleanor continued. "Boxing has gotten stale. Everyone fights the same way with minor variations. You need to be a revolution, not an evolution." For the next 3 hours, she worked him harder than any boxing trainer ever had. She taught him to move sideways while advancing, to shift weight without telegraphing intention, to create angles that didn't exist in traditional boxing footwork. Most importantly, she taught him rhythm, not just how to establish it, but how to intentionally break it. By the end, Clay was drenched in sweat, breathing hard, but his eyes were alight with revelation. This changes everything." He managed between breaths. "We've barely started," Eleanor replied, switching off the record player. "Same time tomorrow, and bring double the cash. I'm worth more than we agreed." Clay smiled. "Yes, ma'am, you certainly are." What followed was 6 weeks of secret training before dawn. While Angelo Dundee shaped Clay's punching technique in the gym, Eleanor Washington revolutionized his footwork in that abandoned warehouse. She introduced concepts that had never been applied to boxing: the float step from capoeira, weight transfers from ballet, hip rotations from traditional African dance. On the morning of their final session, Clay arrived with a different energy. "I want you to come to my fight tomorrow night," he said, handing her a front-row ticket. "I'm going to show the world what we created." Eleanor took the ticket, studying it for a long moment. "I can't sit there, Cassius." "Front row is for important people, not women like me," Clay frowned. "You're the most important part of what's about to happen." She shook her head. "The world isn't ready for that story. I'll be there, but in the back. And after you win, because you will win. Don't you ever tell anyone where you learned to dance like that. Some truths stay between the people who lived them." March 4th, 1963, Miami Beach Auditorium. Doug Jones, the third-ranked heavyweight contender and 7-5 favorite, bounced on his toes in the blue corner. Across the ring, Cassius Clay, still unproven at the highest level, rolled his shoulders with uncharacteristic calm. The crowd of 4,200 people had no idea they were about to witness the debut of what would later be called the Ali Shuffle. In the 10th row, Angelo Dundee nervously chewed his gum, unaware that his prized fighter had been receiving outside coaching. And in the very last row of the auditorium, Eleanor Washington sat alone, wearing large sunglasses and a conservative dress looking nothing like the exotic dancer Velvet. The bell rang. Jones came out aggressive, looking to establish dominance early. But Clay, who would become Muhammad Ali 11 months later, moved like no boxer anyone had ever seen. He seemed to float above the canvas, shifting directions mid-step, creating angles that weren't supposed to exist in the squared circle. Jones, a veteran of 41 professional fights, looked confused, then frustrated, then desperate. In round 4, Clay unveiled what would become his signature move, feet dancing in a rapid shuffle while remaining perfectly balanced before launching a lightning-fast combination that sent Jones staggering backward. The crowd gasped collectively. Even the commentators fell silent for a moment before one exclaimed, "What in God's name was that?" Clay won by unanimous decision. In the dressing room afterwards, surrounded by reporters, someone asked about his unusual footwork. "That ain't footwork," Clay replied with his trademark grin. "That's magic, and a magician never reveals his secrets." Later that night, in a private room at the Hampton House Motel, one of the few upscale establishments that welcome black guests, Clay celebrated with his inner circle. Malcolm X was there, along with football star Jim Brown and singer Sam Cooke, all of them successful black men navigating fame in 60s America. They were drinking non-alcoholic champagne from crystal flutes that cost more than most people's monthly rent, surrounded by the kind of luxury only the wealthy could afford in that era. "That wasn't boxing I saw tonight," Malcolm said, his normally serious face relaxed into a smile. "That was something else entirely." Clay nodded, but his eyes kept drifting to the door. Finally, with a subtle gesture to the security guard, Eleanor was allowed in. She stood awkwardly at the threshold, clearly feeling out of place among these celebrities. "Gentlemen," Clay announced, "I'd like you to meet my friend Eleanor." No further explanation was given, and none of the men asked for one. In their world, discretion was a survival skill. Jim Brown, wearing a custom-tailored suit that cost over $1,000, gallantly offered Eleanor his seat on the plush velvet sofa, while Sam Cooke, whose gold watch was worth more than a new Cadillac, poured her a drink. "I told you," Clay said quietly to her when they had a moment alone. "I told you I'd win." "You did more than win," Eleanor replied. "You changed the game." Over the next year, as Cassius Clay became Muhammad Ali and shocked the world by defeating Sonny Liston for the heavyweight championship, his secret training with Eleanor continued. Their sessions moved from the warehouse to a private gym owned by a millionaire supporter of Ali's career, a businessman named William Reynolds, who had made his fortune in real estate and drove a Rolls-Royce Silver Cloud worth over $12,000. Reynolds provided them with a secured facility where Ali could train away from prying eyes. The gym was equipped with state-of-the-art equipment, imported Italian leather speed bags that cost $500 each, and a special spring-loaded floor that cost $20,000 to install, the same type used by professional ballet companies. "My daddy always said invest in exceptional people," Reynolds told Ali during one visit, his diamond cufflinks catching the light as he gestured around the space. "And you, young man, are the most exceptional athlete I've ever seen." What Reynolds didn't know was that part of what made Ali exceptional was standing right beside him, Eleanor Washington, introduced simply as an assistant coach. As Ali's fame grew, so did the complications of their arrangement. Sports journalists tracked his every move, and his association with the Nation of Islam brought FBI surveillance. Their training sessions became less frequent but more intense. Eleanor continued refining his movement, incorporating elements of other dance forms while adapting everything to boxing's specific demands. "The shuffle isn't just for show," she explained during one session, as Ali practiced the move that was becoming his trademark. "It's mathematical. When you break rhythm unexpectedly, you create a micro moment where your opponent's brain is trying to recalibrate. That split second is when you strike. Ali, always a quick study, took these concepts further than Eleanor could have imagined. He began adding psychological elements, the trash talk, the poems, the theatrical personality, all designed to disrupt his opponent's mental equilibrium before they even stepped into the ring. By 1964, the Ya transformation was complete. The dancing boxer from Louisville had become a global phenomenon. His style so revolutionary that boxing commentators created new vocabulary just to describe it. Terms like float like a butterfly, sting like a bee entered the public lexicon. Though few knew, they were describing techniques rooted in disciplines far from traditional boxing. Eleanor's role diminished as Ali's career soared. Their sessions became monthly, then quarterly consultations. She had her own changes to navigate. With the money Ali had paid her, she'd finally escaped dancing and opened a small dance studio in Chicago, teaching children from the South Side. The same techniques that had made a heavyweight champion. 1967 marked the fracture point. Ali's refusal to be drafted into the Vietnam War cost him his title and his license to box. At 32, stripped of his livelihood and vilified by much of the American public, he faced an uncertain future. Eleanor, now running a successful dance studio in Chicago's Gold Coast neighborhood, reached out repeatedly. But Ali's inner circle had tightened. His affiliation with the Nation of Islam meant many former associates were now kept at arm's length. Messages went unanswered. Arranged meetings were cancelled last minute. "He can't be associated with someone from your previous profession," explained Howard Bingham, Ali's longtime photographer and friend, when he finally met with Eleanor at a diner in Chicago. "The champ is fighting for his reputation now, you understand." She did understand, but that didn't make it hurt any less. The man she had helped transform into a revolutionary fighter was now fighting in courts instead of rings, and she had been deemed a liability to his image. "At least give him this," she said, sliding a sealed envelope across the table. "Please." Bingham, who had always been kind to Eleanor, despite not knowing the full extent of her contribution to Ali's career, nodded and tucked the envelope into his expensive Burberry coat, a gift from a millionaire oil tycoon who supported Ali's stance against the war. Inside that envelope was a detailed analysis of Ali's most recent fights before the ban, noting subtle tells that had crept into his footwork, habits that future opponents might exploit. Along with it was a series of exercises designed to eliminate those patterns. Eleanor's final gift to the champion who had now excluded her from his life. During Ali's forced hiatus from boxing, Eleanor's studio flourished. She began receiving students from the Joffrey Ballet, and wealthy families from Chicago's Gold Coast neighborhood paid premium rates for private lessons with the enigmatic teacher who had trained dancers for international competition. The irony wasn't lost on her that she now moved in the same wealthy circles as some of the men who had once stuffed dollar bills into her garter. Her brownstone apartment filled with expensive art, and she drove a brand-new Mercedes-Benz worth over $6,000, a car that turned heads in her predominantly black neighborhood. She dated occasionally, including a brief relationship with a real estate developer whose diamond-encrusted watch alone cost $11,000. But she never married. Dance remained her true love, and her studio her proudest achievement. Meanwhile, Ali struggled financially during his exile from boxing. Many of his wealthy supporters gradually distanced themselves as the legal battles dragged on. He made money giving speeches at colleges, but it was a fraction of his previous earnings. His mansion required expensive upkeep, and his entourage still expected to be supported in the lifestyle they had become accustomed to. In late 1969, Eleanor received an unexpected call. "Miss Washington, this is Herbert Mohammed, Mr. Ali's manager." Eleanor's heart raced. Yes, is he okay? The champion is physically fine, but he's preparing for his return to boxing. The Supreme Court case looks promising. He's been training. But something is missing. A pause stretched between them. He hasn't asked for me, Eleanor said. Not a question, but a statement. No, Herbert confirmed. He hasn't. But I'm asking. Whatever you did before, he needs it again. He's older now. Slower. The young fighters coming up are studying his old films, learning his patterns. Eleanor closed her eyes, feeling the weight of the years and the hurt. I have students now. Commitments. I can't just disappear to train him in secret. Name your... and price, Herbert said simply. Whatever it costs to rearrange your commitments. Eleanor thought of her studio, of the life she'd built. Then she thought of Ali, still banned from his profession, still fighting against a system determined to break him. It's not about money, she said finally. It's about recognition. I won't be a shadow anymore. Herbert's silence told her everything. Ali's public image was carefully maintained, particularly with his religious conversion. A former exotic dancer couldn't be acknowledged as instrumental to his technique. I understand, Eleanor said, ending the awkward silence. Tell him to remember the rhythm breaks. That's where the power lives. She hung up, knowing it was likely the final chapter in their story. October 30th, 1974. Kinshasa, Zaire. The rumble in the jungle. Muhammad Ali, now 32 years old and considered past his prime, faced the seemingly invincible George Foreman, who had demolished every opponent put before him. Eleanor Washington, now 44, watched the fight from her living room in Chicago. Her dance studio had expanded to 3 locations across the city, and she had just signed a contract to choreograph movements for a major Broadway production. A career achievement that would have seemed impossible during her days as Velvet. On her marble coffee table that cost over $3,000 sat an unsigned postcard from Zaire that had arrived 2 weeks earlier. The message was simple. The rhythm breaks. That's where the power lives. As the fight began, Ali did the unthinkable. Instead of dancing, he went to the ropes, inviting Foreman's devastating punches. The commentators were bewildered. This rope-a-dope strategy seemed suicidal. Round after round, Foreman pounded Ali's arms and body, while Ali conserved energy. But Eleanor saw what others didn't. Even while against the ropes, Ali was using the subtle weight transfers she had taught him years ago. He wasn't static. He was minimizing movement to its mathematical essence, redirecting Foreman's incredible power with barely perceptible shifts. And then, in the 8th round, it happened. As Foreman tired, Ali suddenly broke rhythm, the fundamental principle Eleanor had drilled into him. A quick shuffle, a direction change that made no logical sense, and then a combination that sent the exhausted Foreman crashing to the canvas. Eleanor stood up in her living room, tears streaming down her face. "You remembered," she whispered to the television screen. 3 weeks later, her assistant interrupted a dance class. "There's someone here to see you, Miss Washington. Says he's an old friend." Eleanor walked into her office to find Muhammad Ali, heavyweight champion once again, sitting quietly in a chair that seemed too small for his frame. They looked at each other for a long moment. 12 years of history hanging between them. "You saw the fight?" Ali finally asked, his voice softer than his public persona, slightly slurred from years of punishment in the ring. Eleanor nodded. "You remembered." "I never forgot," he replied. "Not one lesson." From his pocket he produced a small velvet box. Inside was a diamond bracelet that had cost $20,000, nearly the price of a house. "I can't take that," Eleanor said, though the craftsmanship was breathtaking. "It's not a gift," Ali clarified. "It's payment. For Zaire. I used everything you taught me. The rhythm breaks, the weight transfers. It all came back when I needed it most. Eleanor studied him, still handsome despite the damage boxing had inflicted, still charismatic, but older now, more contemplative. "We changed boxing," she said, "together, but nobody will ever know." Ali smiled, the familiar twinkle returning to his eyes. "Some truths stay between the people who lived them. That's what you told me, remember?" She did remember. That warehouse in Louisville seemed a lifetime ago. "I have something for you too," she said, walking to her filing cabinet. She pulled out a folder containing old notes, diagrams of footwork patterns, observations written in her neat handwriting. "The original blueprints of the Ali Shuffle. I thought your daughter Layla might want them someday. I hear she's interested in boxing." Ali leafed through the pages, occasionally nodding or smiling at a particular note. "History books will get so much wrong about me," he said softly. "They'll analyze my footwork for centuries and never know." "Does that bother you?" Eleanor asked. Ali considered the question. "No," he finally said. "Some magic should stay mysterious." As he prepared to leave, Ali turned back one last time. "You know, I always introduce myself as the greatest, but I had help getting there." "The greatest always do," Eleanor replied. Decades later, in 2016, long after both Muhammad Ali and Eleanor Washington had passed away, a doctoral student researching Ali's revolutionary boxing style found a curious note in the champion's personal papers. Scribbled in Ali's handwriting on the back of a training schedule was a simple reminder: "EW, rhythm breaks, power lives there." Historians would debate the meaning of this cryptic note, creating elaborate theories about training techniques and boxing philosophy. But the truth remained, where Eleanor had always said it would, between the two people who lived it, a boxer who changed his sport forever, and a dancer who showed him how. If you've made it this far and felt every word, don't leave without subscribing. I tell these stories with my heart in my hand to reach people like you, who feel, who get emotional, who truly live. If this touched you deeply, give back, comment, subscribe. Come be part of this family with me until the next video.